You've probably heard some brave tales of soldiers who did something heroic during battle. Some soldiers are very brave, and then there are some who simply did things without having any fear at all. But what happens when a soldier becomes the last one left standing and ends up heroically facing an entire army alone? From Vikings who single-handedly took out entire armies to World War II heroes that did the unbelievable. Check out these badass warriors that faced entire armies alone. Nikolai Sirotinin. War is an ugly affair full of shattered lives and unsung heroes. Soldiers are promised glory on the battlefield, but the reality is there are tales of heroism that never really get told. Such is the case with Nikolai Sirotinin. This Russian soldier began his service at only 19 years old, but he didn't let his inexperience stop him. After being injured in an air raid, he was sent back onto the front lines. Instead of giving up, Nikolai decided that if he was going to go, he was going to take a bunch of Germans out with him. He hid in a rye field with a cannon poised as the Germans rolled through. He took the first shot, completely destroying one of their tanks. As he fired the second, the opposing forces panicked. For 2 hours, he made shot after shot, decimating 11 enemy tanks, 7 armored cars, and 57 soldiers. In fact, it was nearly impossible for the Germans to find their opponent. But when they did discover him having only 3 rounds left in his gun, they offered him the chance to surrender, but he bravely refused. So incredible was the feat he accomplished that he was buried not by his fellow soldiers, but by the very Germans he'd fought against. Ovcharenko Dmitry. World War II was a time when quiet country boys were called on to serve in the fight against Nazi Germany. They were strong, capable, and committed. When you get up at dawn and don't stop until long after the sun has sunken below the skyline, it's easy to find the dedication to do what you think is right. Ovcharenko Dmitry was one such countryman. True to his rural upbringing, when Dmitry was injured in the very first days of battle, he didn't let some old cut get him down. Instead of resting, he volunteered at the hospital he'd been sent to. He delivered supplies and ammunition, keeping his temporary home well stocked and protected. One day his car was blocked on both sides by German soldiers, demanding who he was and what he was carrying. Using skills he'd acquired as a child, a few grenades, and a simple axe, Dmitry finished off more than half of the German soldiers who'd come to confront him, sending the rest running for their lives. Vasily Chedekin. In mid-February 1945, a junior sergeant and deputy commander of the 1st Reserve Outpost of the Russian 134th Frontier Regiment, named Vasily Chedekin, did something extraordinary. While in the city of Buda, part of the Hungarian capital Budapest, Vasily was in a battle to destroy an enemy group that had broken out of an encirclement area. Basically, the Russians were closing in on the Germans. A group of 80 to 100 German soldiers had taken refuge in a large building and were holding back the Russian advance. Vasily bravely attacked the group and apparently entered the house alone, taking out enemies with his machine gun. When he ran out of ammunition, he continued to fight close combat and hand-to-hand. At one point he was injured and hit in the head, but continued fighting. When the other German soldiers saw his bravery, they surrendered. In the end, he had taken out 53 enemy soldiers, and another 42 men surrendered to him. By the end of his career, he was awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union, the Order of Lenin, Order of the Red Star, and Order of the Patriotic War. Stepan Gorobets. Staff Sergeant Stepan Kristoforovich Gorobets was born in the small village of Dolinsky, Ukraine, on February 8, 1913, and became a tank commander of the 21st Separate Tank Brigade, and was part of an assault on the Germans during World War II. Tank groups were ordered to attack the Germans on October 17, 1941, in the city of Kalinin, which was full of German hardware and tanks, including Stug 3s and Panzers. The idea was to take the city back from the invaders, break through the city, and unite with units that occupied defense on the Moscow highway. 8 Russian tanks, including Gorobets' No. 3 T-34 tank, entered the German fortified city. Some of the tanks headed towards the station, but the Germans noticed the column of tanks and deployed anti-aircraft guns to attack the tanks. Several tanks were hit and the commander halted the advance of the tanks. At the same time, there was some malfunction with the radio in Gorobets' T-34, and communications are lost with it. Not knowing that he was alone and the only tank left attacking the city, he drove with haste westwards past the station and then proceeding north, crossing railway lines far west of the fighting. On the highways to the city, Gorobets catches a convoy of German motorcyclists and destroys it. Leaving the village of Lebedevo, he also notices a German airfield housing planes and fuel tankers. He then destroys two Ju-87 aircraft and blows up a fuel tanker. The Germans began to target his tank with their anti-aircraft guns and opened direct fire on the T-34. However, Gorobets now understands he is the only one left when the other tanks don't join up with him. The radio station on the tank is still silent, and he knows nothing of the fate of the other battalion. The tank of Gorobets is taking a beating from the anti-aircraft guns, but he heads back into Kalinin and meets a convoy of German troops head-on, crushing the three cars and scattering the enemy. Without reducing speed, the tank breaks into the city. Gorobets notices that there is an anti-aircraft gun pointed directly at him, but before he can react, the gun fires, causing a fire in the tank. Despite this, the tank crushes the anti-aircraft gun under its tracks. His crew was then able to put out the fire while taking out the enemy gun. But another hit takes out the turret, and now the gun will not operate. Gorobets and his tank and crew continue through the occupied city. But the tank is now black from the fire, and the Germans don't notice it and consider the tank as their own. The crew then see a convoy of capture trucks, Gauss vehicles, and Zisses with infantry, and Gorobets orders his driver to push drive into the convoy, smashing the trucks, while the gunner opened fire with a machine gun. The Germans start to make frantic reports that Russian T-34s had entered the city, not knowing there was only one tank. By surprise, Gorobets meets a German tank head-on and rams it. The T-34 then stalls and the Germans yell, "Rus, give up!" But the crew is trying to start the engine. They end up starting the tank and the loader was able to fix the tank's main gun. Leaving the rammed tank behind, the T-34 rushes out into Lenin Square and fires on buildings occupied by the Germans. Gorobets then stumbles on a disguised artillery battery whose guns were deployed in the direction of Moscow. The crew fires on this and destroys all the guns. As Gorobets was leaving the city, the Russians could not tell if the tank was theirs or German. But once everyone realized that it was theirs, they started to cheer. After the war, the memory of Gorobets and his tankers was immortalized. One of the streets of Tver is now named after the commander of the legendary 33 with the tank number 03. Maria Beda. Maria Beda was a Russian scout in Crimea during World War II. She dropped out of school at just 14 years old to work at a hospital before she joined the Red Army in 1941 as a nurse. The interesting thing is that she was also a member of the 172nd Shooting Division and was deployed to the front lines of the North Caucasian Front. She then became a scout with the rank Senior Sergeant and a hero during a mission in 1942 where she was involved in a gun battle against a number of Wehrmacht submachine gunners. She ended up taking out 15 of the machine gunners before she was able to escape wounded. Battle found her once again in July 1942 back on the front lines, and she was captured and taken to Slavuta concentration camp in Ukraine, and then later moved to Ravensbrück. There she stayed and survived until American forces took the camp on May 8, 1945. She was awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. James H. Howard. It's been said that one of the most exciting parts of warfare is air battles. All those planes diving together in a frenzied storm of chaos. This description of battle fits fighter pilot James H. Howard and one of his missions. One cold day in January 1944, James and his squadron were escorting a group of American bombers to their target near Berlin. The pilots suddenly found themselves overwhelmed by enemy fire, and James was separated from the group. When he turned his plane back around, he saw a swarm of 30 enemy aircraft. Without even thinking, he rushed into the middle of the battle and spent the next half hour duking it out in dogfights against enemy aircraft and laying cover for the others. By the time he was done, they were free and clear, and he'd only taken one shot to the wing. When he was asked what on earth he was thinking during the kamikaze move, his response was classic. He who rides a tiger cannot dismount. Hiro Onoda. For most of the men and women on our list, the battles that earned them their claims to fame were relatively short. Hiro Onoda, on the other hand, did the seemingly impossible. On December 26, 1944, Onoda and his men were deployed to the Philippine island Lubang. Within months, all but 3 of his fellow soldiers had fallen. Where others probably would have hunkered down and hidden, Hiro's rigid upbringing ensured that he and his last 3 companions would continue to fight guerrilla style for as long as they could. Eventually, only he was left, sneaking around the jungle with nothing but supplies he'd been dropped off with. Being completely dedicated to his cause, he continued his campaign for nearly 30 years, unaware that his country had already lost the war. At the end of 1945, leaflets were dropped on the island that said the war was over, but Onoda didn't trust them and stayed true to his mission. On March 11, 1974, he walked out of the jungle dressed in his uniform and carrying his sword. He's thought to have been among the last Japanese soldiers from World War II to surrender. Lone Viking. Sometimes when a soldier goes above and beyond, the tales of their efforts become more of a legend. Such is the case with the Lone Viking. As the story goes, he and his Viking buddies were pillaging in the English countryside when the Saxons, defending their land, attacked them. As the 2 armies clashed, it became evident that the Saxon army was far superior. The Vikings were being pushed back. They had started to lose hope, but before the battle could be totally lost, a single Viking pushed his way through his retreating brothers. Big and broad-shouldered, he advanced on the charging Saxons alone and made his stand on a bridge. Using only a heavy axe, he cut down anyone who got too close and ended up taking out over 40 men. That's in over an hour with arrows sticking out of his torso. He was finally felled by a soldier who snuck under the bridge. Ben Al-Salaman. Ben Al-Salaman was your typical all-American boy. He grew up, went to school,
I grew up in a place where they told you what to chase, told you how to run the race. Every move was on the page, but I didn't like their way. Had to fight and misbehave, had to find a way to change, had to leave to find my way. Caught up in a daydream, I beat my mind up there almost daily. It's how I pass time, no opinions safely. It's how I understand what I want in this place, see. Cause everybody wanna tell you bad things, what could go wrong, what fame brings. But success is a finicky thing, and if you ain't sure, no, it'll never be. I don't wanna let myself down, myself down. I don't wanna let myself down, myself down. I don't have to plan it, I can go change my fate. You won't understand it, all alone, that's okay. People I can't stand, man, they don't want me to change. Keep me where I'm standing, and I don't wanna be where I am. And I want something more, take a chance. It could be possibly my last